All right, all right. Let's talk about the Rings of Power. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while now. I know this is a little bit late here. It's been over for quite a few weeks now, but I wanted to give my thoughts on it because it played at the same time as House of the Dragon. We were focused on House of the Dragon with the live streams and all that stuff as well. And so I want to talk about the Rings of Power and some of the criticism. I'm going to try to be fair here on why most people thought this did not work. And generally overall agreed. Now, there were some things that looked outstanding on the show and all that stuff as well, and there were some good scenes and some good parts as well. But for the most part, it just did not work, and Amazon has pretty much a big failure on their hands, honestly, in the scope of being a Lord of the Rings Tolkien adaptation. So I wanted to go over at least the major storylines and give my opinions on it and why I think it didn't work. Again, I'm going to try to be fair. Again, there were some good parts, and I really wanted this show to be good. I was excited about it years ago when they announced it 2 or 3 years ago. I started doing, Lord of the Rings lore videos. I did a few of those as I knew this was going to be coming. So I did some history on Sauron. I did history on Gandalf, the Maiar, etc., on this channel. But this show really ended up being overall a disappointment, even though I really, really wanted to like it, and I wanted to watch every week to see if, something changed or if the writing got better, whatever. Most of all, this was a writing problem for the most part. So let's go over the main storylines and talk about some of the issues that I had and the good things as well. And again, I'm trying to be fair here, but there's not a lot of great things I can say about it, honestly. And there's been a lot of criticism out there, a lot of hate, and some of it is absolutely justified, and some of it is probably not. So again, I'll try to be fair, but let's talk about first the storyline, because you had so many storylines. The problem overall with this show, let me start with this, is that it didn't feel like, you didn't really know what the story was about. We know it's called the Rings of Power. We finally got some of that in the last episode in the finale, but you really didn't know what the story was. So it was kind of all over the place. And again, I didn't mind that so much. I didn't mind a little intrigue and, and skipping over different storylines, but I think the pacing was a big issue for a lot of people. It didn't get into it right away, and it just, every time you thought you would get an answer, would switch over to another scene or to another storyline, and they finally started converging really in the last 2 episodes. So let's start with the Hobbits / Meteor Man. So this was one of the main storylines, and yes, they are hobbits. This is another thing. Obviously, the lore breaking is a big problem for a lot of people, and there was a lot of lore breaking, or at least ignoring some lore, and I do understand to some degree they didn't have rights to the Silmarillion, and other things like that. So they needed those rights. If you're going to do a show about this time period, you need more than just a few side notes from Return of the King is essentially what they got. And they definitely took some Peter Jackson moments as far as lines and dialogue from the films as well. And I know a lot of people, even Christopher Tolkien, didn't like the movies. And I thought the movies were outstanding. I think they're probably the greatest fantasy show of all time as far as movies. And this is the greatest story of all time. Whether you like Tolkien's writing or not, that's a whole different conversation. But the story overall is just one about hope and people coming together. And I think it's the greatest story of all time. So this is part of the reason people were so passionate about Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power, and this show, and these showrunners essentially being brand new. That's the main problem, I think, is the writing. And these guys essentially, if you watch Game of Thrones, essentially they hired Dan and Dave. Right, Dan and Dave, except the difference is the first 4 or 5 seasons, you can argue that as well. Dan and Dave did an outstanding job adapting A Song of Ice and Fire to Game of Thrones, and then it went off the rails when they got past the actual book material and started making shit up and started, we should subvert expectations, all this kind of thing. But essentially, these writers, J.D. Payne and them, they have no credits. They essentially have no writing credits. They have a couple where they wrote some stuff that was never made, if that tells you anything. And that pretty much came through in this. So, again, I'm not trying to be all negative. I'm just being honest. If you watch the show and you really watch it again and you look and really think about it in these kind of terms from a writing perspective, you'll see that the dialogue, a lot of it's cringy. A lot of it's just like trying to sound poetic, but they're not really saying anything. There's a lot of issues with the writing. And I want to start doing more of that on this channel. Is being a writer myself, I want to start talking about some of these things when I do. From a writing perspective, and so it helps people understand what makes a good show and what makes something like this, where it's kind of okay at parts, but really overall it kind of bombs and certainly falls short of expectations. Now, to be fair, there were very, very high expectations, but if you're going to buy the rights to the Lord of the Rings and spend $1 billion and all this stuff for the rights and for, you know, $500 million for the show itself for season 1, you need to hire people that know what the fuck they're doing. I mean, let's just be clear. These writers, J.D. Payne and them, it became more of and there was definitely some political aspect of it too. Obviously, that's another big complaint is, you know, it had a lot of the message in there as well. You know, strong woman with Galadriel. We'll talk about her as well. But there was some of that, and not that much enough to really bother me. And from that aspect, it was just more of the almost just disregard for the lore. Though we're going to do it better than Tolkien type of attitude. I felt with the marketing and with the interviews they've done, and then of course the actors and actresses. I mean, they made it about basically identity politics in their marketing. I mean, that's what they did. I mean, so we can't sit there and deny that that's what they were doing. And so there was an aspect of that, and that just turns people off. You know, it's, you know, quote unquote woke stuff and all that kind of thing. And there was certainly an aspect to that, to be fair. I mean, it's not just, you know, me and you know thousands of other Tolkien fans just making things up. This is literally what they said in their marketing. This was about, you know, updating Tolkien to the modern world and all that kind of stuff. And you know, Middle Earth is already diverse. But anyway, I'm not going to really get into the race swapping and stuff like that. I mean, there was enough talk about that. I actually don't mind some of that. I do understand to some degree that for a modern audience, you do want to attract other fans. And that's part of the marketing. So I do understand to a degree, you know, why you would make... you know, you would swap races and make a more diverse cast and all that. I don't have a problem with that in and of itself. I have a problem with it in the sense of just checking boxes to satisfy some corporate whatever to show that they give a shit about all people and all this stuff. You know, it's honestly, it's just marketing. And that's what it is. It's nothing more than that. They do it and again, I understand to a degree. I mean, I understand they want, you know, more fans. They want, you know, different, you know, fans who are not typically into fantasy, you know, but I think Game of Thrones and stuff changed a lot of that. So I'm glad to see that's expanding in that way where more people are involved in these great stories. And the great thing about this type of show is hopefully it'll lead people to the books and go back and read Tolkien. It's always been accessible to everyone. It's just not been the type of thing that's, you know, written for one group of people. Obviously, Tolkien's case, he wrote it for England, for his country after the war and all this kind of thing. So that's important, you know, to some degree. And you got to respect the source material and the author. And we all understand there needs to be changes, right, from book to screen. I mean, you think about it when you read a page in a book. Let's say you read a page in a book or even a chapter. You're getting, you know, character descriptions and setting and all this kind of stuff, and then dialogue, all that kind of stuff as well. And so you have to describe their clothing, what they're eating, you know, where they're standing, how they're, you know, their body language, all that kind of stuff. When on TV, that takes maybe 3 seconds because you just see their clothing. You just see how they're standing. You see their body language. Then you listen to their dialogue. So we understand in all aspects that you have to make up some things. You have to make up some characters to fill in some gaps. Obviously, this is a tale of the Second Age, and there's not a lot of material on that, specifically dialogue. So we understand that, but the show just didn't work because of the writing. It has nothing to do with the characters or the diversity, any of that stuff. The story didn't work, and they seem to really disrespect Tolkien in itself. They wrote the book Tolkien never wrote. No, you wrote a story and used familiar names and characters to sell that story, and you advertised it as one thing, and it came off as completely different. So let's get into it. The Hobbits, and yes, these are fucking hobbits. Harfoots are one type of hobbit. They're the most common type of hobbit. You know, when you see Sam and Frodo in the Lord of the Rings and all those characters we all know and love, those are essentially Harfoots. They're hobbits. So why are they pretending they can't say the word hobbit? They do have rights to the Lord of the Rings and all this stuff, so they can use the word hobbit, and they actually put out in their material, in their press material, that these are quote-unquote proto-hobbits. No, they're hobbits. Harfoots are hobbits. But anyway, I actually didn't mind the inclusion of hobbits in this story. I understand, again, marketing. I mean, you know, it's a familiar thing. So you had essentially a female Sam and Frodo. And I do understand that you have to use that type of thing for marketing because it's a familiar thing. Hobbits, Sam and Frodo from Lord of the Rings. So you're trying to bring in some familiar elements to help sell this show to more people and get more views. And I do understand that. So I actually didn't mind having the hobbits in the story, but I had a problem with the whole Meteor Man thing. First of all, let me say something about this group of hobbits, and these were, before obviously the Shire and all that stuff, and I thought that's what they were probably going to do, and they may end up doing that later season, where they eventually get to what would become the Shire and settle down, because these are obviously nomad-style hobbits. But the point being that is they're really kind of evil little bastards. They leave you behind if you go off trail, if you break their little rules. They got these like hardcore rules, and if you break those rules and talk to people outside of the hobbits or whatever it may be, they'll take your fucking wheels and leave you behind. And then they have the audacity to have this little ceremony to remember you by, and they name how you died or how you got lost. So if you think about it, it was a pretty dumb set of rules for this nomadic clan of hobbits that were supposed to be so good and kind-hearted and all that kind of thing. So it was really, really odd to have that dynamic in there where they're, this is kind of just hobbits mind their own business, and, this meteor crashes, but the hobbits themselves are kind of assholes when it comes to their rules. And we heard the stories about why other hobbits were dead. They left behind because they broke their little rules and went off trail, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you can't keep up, sorry, we'll sing a song about you. It's really odd. It was really odd writing. We should have taken their wheels and left them behind. I mean, that was literally in the show. It was really odd writing. And then we get to Meteor Man. We had the Meteor Man thing where this guy crashes down, obviously. And now, of course, we know that he's likely Gandalf. Obviously, this is going to contain spoilers. I should have said that earlier, obviously, but if we're talking about the season, it's going to contain spoilers. It looks like he's going to be Gandalf, and I don't like this at all. I like, it's fine for the mystery to come in. It was also a Sauron misdirect, or they tried to be clever. You could tell the writers thought they were clever with this, trying to be a Sauron misdirect. We have no problem if it's a blue wizard as far as, hardcore Tolkien fans. But the blue wizards didn't come in a meteor. They came on a boat like everyone does from Valinor. So I don't know why they did the meteor thing. And I believe, honestly, they only did it because it was a cool shot to see him land there in the middle of this meteor crash site, and it looked like the Eye of Sauron. And I think that was really the only reason they did it this way. And also, I guess, to make it more convenient for the hobbits or Harfoots to run into him to kind of, intertwine those storylines. Because obviously when you sail from the west, from Valinor, you're going to land somewhere in the west of Middle-earth, and then they wouldn't necessarily run into the hobbits. So they did it this way to some degree to make this storyline work. But what I don't like is them specifically breaking the lore when it specifically stated that Gandalf and the other wizards, the Maiar, didn't come into Middle-earth until 1000 of the Third Age. Now, again, in Tolkien's later writings, he said that the blue wizards may have come earlier in the Second Age. So that would be fine, but again, they came on a boat together and not individually necessarily, and definitely didn't come down through a meteor. So if they wanted to change the way they arrived, I don't really have a big problem with that. It was kind of a cool thing to have them run into the hobbits and all that stuff and kind of get their story going as well. But I don't like the idea this is Gandalf. And he clearly used language that Gandalf used from Lord of the Rings. Follow your nose.
Statue. If you die in the always follow your nose.
So this is going to be Gandalf. I mean, I don't think they're going to use a random blue wizard that nobody really knows a lot about. They are going to the east, and Gandalf does state in the Silmarillion, etc., that he does not ever go to the east, but that doesn't mean he didn't go to the east. So this is clearly going to be Gandalf by the language they used and the dialogue they used with him once he learned to speak after he picked up a staff. Apparently he just needed some staff to kind of harness his powers and remember who he is and all that type of thing, and why he came to Middle-earth and why he's going to the east to find this particular star constellation. We're ignoring what Tolkien said about the wizards, and Gandalf is already here first. Sauron's not here first. The blue wizards are now, not even talked about apparently. We'll see. They could end up making that a blue wizard. I guess they could potentially still do that, but I doubt it. They're going to use these big popular names like Gandalf, and nobody really knows anything about the blue wizards unless you're a hardcore Tolkien nerd. The last thing about this little storyline is, what is this Sauron cult? We had the three, the Observer and the other two or whatever, and they seem kind of cool, actually. She was pretty powerful, and I like seeing the magical aspect of things, and clearly they thought that he was Sauron, and they called him Sauron, and he don't remember, and they're basically saying, look, he's going to start remembering, he's going to learn his powers again, he's relearning his powers, all that stuff. So, but what was this Sauron cult? Why were they not explained? Who were they? We still don't know the answers. And then, when not Gandalf, waved his magic wand at the end with his staff, and I don't know if he killed him. I don't know if he just banished him. I have no idea. Why did they look like Nazgul? Why did they look like Ringwraiths? I don't, it was just something where the writer said, oh, that kind of looks cool from the main story because the Nazgul are very famous. They're very important. The Witch King and the Nazgul are Sauron's most trusted servants and all this kind of thing. And I thought, oh, yeah, they just put that in there to make them kind of look like it. But the problem is when you show that type of thing, which again, it looks fine. It looks good on screen, is that you're undermining the whole story about the rings of power and what the One Ring does. They did mention throughout the story he's trying to tap in, and I think it was Adar who told Galadriel and Halbrand / Sauron that Sauron was looking into the unseen world and experimenting with this magic about the unseen world. But that hasn't happened yet because there's no rings yet. So this has not been discovered, but somehow there's already like these Nazgul race. But somehow we already have this, short-haired, feminine, whatever it is, Slim Shady Sauron cult that looked like the Nazgul. So it's just clear that they just didn't know what they were doing. Was it cool to have like a cult that knows Sauron's returning? Sure, that you could have made that work, but we got no answers. There was no context. We just had a group of people looking for him. They found the Meteor Man. They chased him down thinking it was Sauron, and that was it. He kind of banished him or killed him or whatever it was. We don't have any answers. Where they came from, why is there a cult, how did they know Sauron was returning, why did they think he was coming down in a meteor since he's already been hidden out in Middle-earth anyway? They gave us zero answers. So anyway, that was the main thing with the Hobbit / Meteor Man storyline. Let's go to Elrond and Duran and Disa. I actually thought this was the best part of the show. I actually cared for them the most, their relationship. I don't necessarily like Elrond that much as far as the way he's portrayed, but I think he's okay. And I definitely like Duran, but I like their relationship a lot. I think that was the best part of the show as far as it made me actually care about Elrond and Duran, specifically Duran. And Disa had a great role as well. I think that was the most touching part of the show as far as the writing goes. It focused on their relationship. But one thing I didn't like about this storyline was the kind of the fake origin story of Mithril. Now, I don't know if this is going to still be like legend in the story. The legend sounds cool where you have this powerful elf fighting against a Balrog with a Cimmeril that's been hidden in a tree, and they're fighting over this tree trying to save it, the elf, and then the Balrog's trying to destroy it. And then as they put their good and evil into this tree where there's a Silmaril, then lightning strikes and it goes down in the roots and creates Mithril. And that kind of sounds cool for a legend, but I think they're actually trying to make that the origin story, and I don't like it at all because it's completely made up. It's not Tolkien at all. And while the legend kind of sounds cool, it doesn't really fit into reality in that world. So I don't like the made-up Mithril origin story. Again, I hope it's just like a legendary tale that's not really true. That would be fine because, again, legends are cool to have within a story. You have legends within a legend type of thing. And that doesn't mean that Mithril was actually created that way, but I think that's actually what they're going with. So I didn't like that. But as far as just the general storyline of Duran and Elrond being friends and, elves and dwarves working together, that type of thing, it was the best part of the show as far as their friendship. And you really, for the most part, you only really cared about those two, if at all, maybe just even Duran. Maybe you cared about the Hobbits in some way. For example, with Nori, at least you got some, interaction with her and her friends and her family and that type of thing. But the best just overall relationship in the story for me was definitely Elrond and Duran. So I enjoyed that, but they didn't utilize it like they should have, because you had Celebrimbor coming in and he's having this big forge made. And why? Why is he at? Well, we all assumed, okay, well, he's already been spoken to by this guy named Anatar. All you would really have to do was have a line in there where maybe for example, Elrond says, why are you having this brand new forge built, this giant forge where you need the help of the dwarves and all that kind of stuff? And he could have simply said, oh, I ran into this really wise elf named Anatar. He's one of the Noldor, for example, and he came with the gift of knowledge of I should, do this to help the elves and to preserve Middle Earth or whatever it may be. at least get the idea going in his head about, creating something great, even if he doesn't know it's going to be rings yet. So we kind of assumed, or at least I did while I was watching it, when he had this, he was having this forge built, that he had already spoken to Annatar, and then we would see Annatar again, because obviously Annatar would just give it away that that's Sauron. But the point being that at least mention that you spoke to this, fair elf named Annatar, and then you would have a reason to be building this thing, because we don't even get the rings till the last episode, and you didn't even know what you were going to build. So it made no sense to have this big old giant thing being built for no reason. You should have already spoken to Annatar on some level. So they really kind of screwed that up. I don't understand. They just kind of threw shit in there without really any explanation or knowing where they were going with any direction, and then they didn't answer any of the questions that were generated by that. And that's the number one rule in storytelling. When you write something, you propose these questions, you put these mysteries up front, you ask these questions, and you promise the reader or show watcher that later you're going to answer those questions. Otherwise, it's just in vain, and you just put some shit in there that didn't mean anything. So it's clear to me that they did not understand or purposely chose to disregard the original story of Lord of the Rings. I mean, just the overall concept of the story. So, anyway, let's move on to the biggest problem, I think, in the show. I would say tied with Numenor is Galadriel. Galadriel is your main character, a beloved character for years and years and years, obviously ever since the books came out, but especially the movies and Cate Blanchett's version of Galadriel. She's an all-powerful mage-like elf, part of the Noldor. She's seen the light of the two trees herself. She comes from Valinor, and she has a lot of history, and by the time this show takes place, she's already thousands of years old. But she had no emotion in this show except one, and that was resting bitch face.
There's a tempest in me. And it will not be quelled by you, Regent.
But really think about it. Go back and watch her scenes. And again, I'm not necessarily blaming the actress. I think she, she's acting on what she's given. I don't know if she's the best for this role or not. She looks the part. She looks great as far as Galadriel, a younger version of Galadriel, because elves do age very slowly. But she didn't have any other emotion. It was just all pin up rage and anger, and she was just very unlikable, and that's just the way it was. I think most people agree. It's not in her character to be solely motivated by revenge. She never had revenge in her heart, and she wanted to go rule a kingdom of her own in Middle Earth. That's what she wanted to do. She was all powerful and knowledgeable, being described as one of the fairest and certainly wisest of the Eldar and all that kind of thing. So I don't understand, other than the fact that they tried to do a story arc. This is what I kept hearing. Look, this is Galadriel first. She'll eventually get to that Galadriel we know and love in the movies. They tried to do a story arc, a character arc with her. They tried to do a character arc is what I'm trying to say. And I do understand that to some degree, but it doesn't work, and it's not really an excuse, because she's already thousands of years old and been in all these battles, apparently, which she never was in The Lord of the Rings. She was never leading armies. She was never in armor. She was never carrying a sword. She was never in battles. You saw The Lord of the Rings, and you saw how she was against Sauron, for example, in the extended version. You saw, her go up against Sauron for a second and use her magic. I mean, that was Galadriel. You don't have to put armor on her and a sword in her hand to make her a strong female lead. And the worst part about it, instead of just having her be Galadriel and already be strong in every way, shape, and form, they made the elves around her look stupid. They made all the other elves around her, her company of elves, look like idiots, and that's what they tried to do to make her look better, and that was just shitty writing. That's just dumb. That's not how you build a strong character, by making other people around them look like idiots. And that's exactly what they did. I mean, you saw episode 1, they're climbing in the ice cave and they find the ice troll, and these elves who have been around for thousands of years, and they're all outstanding warriors, They get their asses handed to them, but then Galadriel comes in and don't even look at the damn troll, does some gymnastics and flips around, cuts the damn thing a couple times without even looking at it, and it falls to its death. Now go back to Lord of the Rings, when they get trapped in the room in Khazad-dûm and the cave troll comes in. It took Gandalf and Aragorn and Gimli, Hobbits, Legolas, etc., all together, working together to kill that big-ass troll, and she did it in like 3 cuts without even looking at it. Now, again, I do understand, to be fair, they did try to do a character arc, and this was meant to be this way. You were not supposed to really like her at first. Sauron himself and Adar both called her out about, you better look in the mirror, and they made this a point, trying to distinguish, between her and the evil she's fighting. That was the kind of the point of this whole little character arc. I mean, you had Gil-galad send her back to Valinor. They purposely did this character arc, but it's not really an excuse for somebody who's thousands of years old and should already have some kind of demeanor and presence and be able to talk to people. I mean, she busted up in Numenor. They literally saved her life and pulled her off her boat and brought her and gave her food and water and the whole thing. And she demands to see the manager. I know that's been overused, but it's the truth. I mean, it's like she was the ultimate Karen. She just busted up there trying to see the manager and trying to shit all over the Queen Regent and everybody else, and they just saved your life. So the whole character arc thing with Galadriel was no excuse. She was just unlikable the whole time, and again, she was supposed to be, because as you can see in the last couple episodes, she started to kind of understand, yeah, I've kind of become the thing I'm supposed to be fighting. So I do understand that to a degree, but it was just not done well at all whatsoever. So Galadriel was the biggest problem for me with Lord of the Rings. Alongside, the last thing I want to mention real quick, as far as the worst thing, is Numenor. Numenor was by far with her the worst part of the show. I mean, Numenor is this place that we all wanted to see as during their prime, the most powerful men in the history of Middle-earth. I mean, this is the line of people that Aragorn comes from later on. I mean, these are powerful people. They used to be in league with the elves, and they're the faithful and versus the king's men and all that stuff. I won't get into all the lore here. The point being this, we had great shots of Numenor. I mean, it looked beautiful. How could it not with some of the big wider shots? But then some of the interior scenes felt like a soap opera. It was really odd. They literally some cringe-worthy scenes where, we don't want no elves in here. They're going to take all our jobs. And if that's not political theater for modern politics, I don't know what is. I mean, it was just horrible for them to write something like that. They tried to overdo things with poetic language, and you think about what they said, and they really didn't say a word. They just put a bunch of words together, trying to pull out a little bit of Tolkien-ish type of stuff, and it didn't work at all. I understand they have the faithful and the king's men and all that stuff, and Al-Farazan, and he's they didn't really even give us the reason why Numenor falls or will fall. Is they're scared of dying. They want immortality like the elves. They're jealous of the elves. They didn't give us any of that stuff. They just showed the place, and we're supposed to fall in love with it from 1 or 2 good shots of the island or the city. And that's supposed to make us forgive everything else with the horrible dialogue. And the main part, as far as the story of how they got involved in Middle-earth, was we're going to take 5 ships over because Sauron's back? Or 5? I mean, do you have a giant army/navy or not? Numenor is the most powerful civilization in the history of Middle-earth of men, and they have to take volunteers in the streets to go to Middle-earth. So that's a setting up that they don't already have established trade and outpost in Middle-earth. But then later on, in the second to last episode, when Mordor was created, and they all get, they all find each other, go back to the encampment, which apparently they set up and we never saw. Then they said they're going to go back to this Numenorian outpost. Well, previously, you kind of established that you didn't have outposts in Middle-earth. You didn't want to go to Middle-earth. You never want to leave Numenor. You didn't want to have anything to do with Middle-earth and elves anymore. It was really confusing, and you didn't even understand their motivations. So if somebody just, watched this show and have never read anything about Lord of the Rings, maybe you just saw the movies, you would have no idea. You would have no idea what Numenor is even in the show for. You would have no idea of their motivations and why they're there. Who is Isildur? What does that even matter? You would have no idea why this island's even being shown, other than being a pretty picture on the screen or a pretty, vista shot or whatever. So really bad. Numenor was, by far the worst part of the show. That kind of intertwined with Galadriel's character. And it was just really bad for the most part. And, you know, like, for example, they had some, you know, made-up characters, which, again, I have no problem with making up characters. But why are we seeing, for example, Isildur's sister, who was never a thing? Why is she in the show? Why is she even there? I mean, she did nothing but stand around and watch people and try to get them to stop war. And then later on, she goes in with the king before he dies, and he thinks it's his daughter, the Queen Regent, and she goes to find a seeing stone. And then that's like supposed to be like this big cliffhanger. We're not even going to care because we don't even know who she is or what she's about, why she's there. I don't understand it. And last but not least, let's talk about Sauron. Got the Dark Lord behind me over here, the real Sauron. Halbrand, clear as day that he was Sauron from the get-go. I mean, just this random dude showing up on a raft with some other people. And some of the lines immediately gave it away. And I appreciate the idea of keeping Sauron a secret. I really do. Like, anybody could be Sauron at any time. And that may have worked better if you actually had Sauron as different people at different times. So maybe you had Annatar talking to Celebrimbor in the background and he walks off, but they don't have to name him as Annatar for a while. You have him as Halbrand when he's around. The point being is it was fairly clear, and they tried to use Meteor Man / Gandalf to kind of be a red herring or whatever, when clearly all day long by the lines, it was just overtly, it was either like this. It was either they're overtly saying this is Sauron, and then they were going to have some big surprise that, oh, no, he was just actually just the old king of the Southlands, or they're just really bad writers who just didn't really try to hide it at all. I mean, I think it's probably the latter, obviously, since we got the big revelation in the last episode. So his lines gave it away early, so it wasn't really a big mystery. We were just kind of waiting on the official reveal. Why was there no Annatar? Why was there no Annatar Lord of Gifts? They made Annatar, they kind of just replaced him with Halbrand, who just showed up with this injury, and all of a sudden he's better. And then they talk about, you know, Celebrimbor, one of the greatest elven smiths in the history of the Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth, the whole thing, the whole legendarium. And he says, why don't you try to combine it with other alloys to, you know, amplify its power? Like he wouldn't know about alloys. I mean, it was just dumb. And then the one thing the show was made and named after, the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. And we didn't get the previous rings that Sauron actually helped to make as Annatar. So we skip straight to the Elven rings, which, again, Annatar / Sauron had no hand in making. So that's why he couldn't really control those 3 rings of power with the one ring. But the previous 16, the 7 to the Dwarf Lords and the 9 for men doomed to die, we didn't even see those being made, and those are the ones he directly helped with, and his hands were on them, and how he was able to imbue them with his power in order to rule them all with his ring that he makes in Mordor. So they specifically skipped all the other rings, made the Elven rings, and now we're supposed to wonder, like, where are the other rings? How are they going to do this? He's already back in Mordor. So essentially, you have had him help create the 3 Elven rings, or give him the ideas for it. Then he leaves because he's discovered, and he just takes off. They create the Elven rings without his help, so he has no power over them. He's going to go back to Mordor and make the one ring, and we're supposed to just find out, oh, the other rings were already made sometime. I guess. I don't know what they're doing. The one thing this was about, it was named after the Rings of Power. This is the thing we wanted to see happen. And they couldn't even show Annatar / Sauron helping make the 16 rings before the 3 Elven rings. And I don't understand how they're going to do that, because now he's back in Mordor. Why would he go back to Mordor in that form, for one thing? Why not fly as a vampire bat? I mean, that's what he can do at this point in time. He still can change shape and form. And then now he's going to leave again to come back as Annatar maybe and make 16 more rings after the 3 Elven rings are made. I don't know what they're doing. So anyway, I've been rambling on way too long. I apologize in advance. I just wanted to get my thoughts out on it, because I really want to watch the show and enjoy it. And, you know, again, it's hard to put being a Tolkien fan aside and watching. If you can kind of put that aside and not think about lore and who's who, and just think about, you know, it's just a kind of a generic fantasy show, I think some people probably enjoy the show. And that's fine. If you loved it, that's fine too. I'm just saying you can't watch this show with any kind of knowledge of the lore and think this is actually Lord of the Rings. To my, you know, again, I'm going to watch season 2. I definitely look forward to it coming out every week to see, like, okay, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. They're going to bring in this and do this, and it just never happened. So I wanted to love it. I just couldn't. But again, I will watch season 2 because I want to see. Honestly, I'm curious if they're going to replace these writers because I think they're pretty. Amazon got busted, deleting reviews and trying to pay YouTubers like Hello Future Me, one of my favorite channels who does story-based stuff like this. And they tried to literally pay for, good reviews with big YouTubers, with Access Media, all that kind of stuff. And they even had to turn on them and started putting out articles. Yeah, this is not right. We got a Galadriel problem. We got a this problem. We got a that problem. So the same people who were kind of shilling for them before it even came out, because there was already some backlash based off their promotional materials, then all of a sudden now, as the show came out, they really couldn't hide it anymore. They had to admit that it was really not that great. So anyway, guys, I'll leave you with that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I tried to be fair about it. I know it was more of a rant, but when you get into this type of stuff, when you're discussing, you can't really think of any of the good stuff, because there were some good parts that made you feel like I'm in Middle-earth again. It's Lord of the Rings. This is kind of cool, because the bad stuff was so bad that it really overshadowed those good little moments and those good little character moments, etc. It's just really mind-blowing, honestly, how they thought this was like a good product. I don't understand why somebody can't stand up in Amazon Studio and say, no, you can't. Where's the other rings? Or why are we confused about who Numenor is? Why did they not have a big navy? We saw all these people on these boats in earlier episodes. Why do we have to recruit people from the street to go to Middle-earth? I don't understand how this got past people, but I guess because there's probably an agenda there, and nobody wants to say anything because of, I don't know, cancel culture, or if you don't like this, you're fired type of thing. But anyway, Bezos, you fucked up. You wanted your Game of Thrones. You had an opportunity, but it ultimately comes down to horrible writing. And I know that J.D. Payne and the other dude didn't write every little thing. They had other writers, but they are the showrunners. They're responsible for it. It comes down to them approving these things, and they really thought that they could just make this all modern and be better than Tolkien and write the show that Tolkien never wrote, or the book that Tolkien never wrote, and they thought that would fly for some reason. So we'll see what they do. I'm interested to see what happens in the off season, if they take a back seat, or if there's more, if there's changes or whatever it may be. We'll see what happens. But anyway, sorry, I will stop ranting now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Appreciate all the support. I don't know what we're doing on the future of this channel. I really have no idea. I would love to do more commentary stuff like this, but not necessarily about TV shows. I can no longer rely on waiting on seasons of TV shows coming. House of the Dragon came and gone already, and it did nothing as far as the channel goes, or very little. I am appreciative of everybody stopping by the live streams and all that, but I've got to be realistic about it and the future of this channel, so I don't really know what that is. But anyway, guys, again, let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.